The Ottoman harem has long been imagined in the West as nothing more than a place of luxury and sensual pleasure, filled with beautiful women dancing for the Sultan's amusement. But the reality was far more complex and far more powerful. The imperial harem was not just a private space. It was a political institution at the very heart of the empire. Behind its guarded walls, decisions were made that shaped wars, alliances, and even the line of succession to the throne. The Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, often wielded immense influence, while concubines who gained a ruler's favor could rise from slavery to extraordinary heights of power. Eunuchs controlled the inner workings of the harem, acting as both protectors and political players. At times, the harem was even the true center of government, especially during the Sultanate of Women, when powerful royal women guided the empire's destiny from behind the scenes. Far from being a place of idle leisure, the Ottoman harem was a crucible of ambition, intrigue, and survival, a world where a slave girl could become queen, and where the fate of an empire was decided in whispers, not on the battlefield. The Ottoman harem, often misunderstood as a place of pleasure and leisure, was in reality a highly organized and deeply political institution. Its origins did not lie with the Ottomans themselves. Instead, it was an inherited tradition, passed down through centuries of Middle Eastern empires, each adapting the practice to their own cultural and religious frameworks. By the time the Ottomans built their empire, the harem had become more than just the private residence of women. It was the very mechanism by which dynasties ensured continuity and, more importantly, control. At the heart of the imperial harem was one central purpose: to safeguard the patrilineal descent of Osman, the founding father of the Ottoman dynasty, through the male heirs of each reigning sultan. Yet the preservation of this lineage came at a heavy cost. Ottoman succession law was notoriously brutal. To prevent civil wars and the bloody conflicts of rival princes, a newly crowned sultan was expected to execute his brothers. This policy of fratricide, while cruel, was seen as a necessary safeguard against rebellion. Later, the practice softened into another equally infamous tradition, confining royal brothers to the so-called golden cage within the palace. Here, princes lived in luxury yet isolation, denied both freedom and political influence. Though their lives were spared, their ambitions were suffocated, and their futures uncertain. Inside the harem itself, power was structured in a strict hierarchy. At the very top stood the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother. Her authority was absolute within the harem and often extended into imperial politics. As the woman who had given birth to the ruler of the empire, she was regarded not only with reverence, but also with fear. Her voice could sway the Sultan's decisions. Her alliances could make or break the careers of viziers, and her rivalries could shift the balance of power within the palace walls. Beneath her came the Sultan's daughters, the Ottoman princesses. Unlike in some European monarchies, their role was not to carry dynastic legitimacy through their children, since the Ottoman line could only pass through men of the dynasty. Instead, they served as invaluable political assets. Marriages to Ottoman princesses were carefully arranged, binding powerful viziers and governors to the royal family. A princess's wedding was not simply a personal affair. It was a statement of loyalty, a strategy of empire building, and a subtle means of surveillance, as her presence in her husband's household ensured his fidelity to the throne. Then came the concubines, who formed the living, breathing body of the harem. Their numbers could range from hundreds to thousands, depending on the period. But within this multitude, their positions varied dramatically. Some remained mere servants, never once drawing the Sultan's attention. Others, chosen for their beauty, wit, or talents, entered the Sultan's bedchamber and gained a higher rank. These women were known as Qurei. Should a concubine bear the Sultan a son, her status immediately transformed. She became a Khaden, a consort, elevated above ordinary concubines. At the pinnacle of this hierarchy was the Ba Khaden, or chief consort, who often rivaled the influence of the Valide Sultan herself. But even this path to power was tightly regulated. In the early Ottoman tradition, no concubine could bear more than one male child to the Sultan. Once she had done so, she would be removed from his bed and live on in luxury, but without further access. This rule, seemingly harsh, was intended to prevent brothers from uniting behind the influence of a single ambitious mother, thereby sparking civil wars of succession. Each son was meant to compete on his own merits, not under the shadow of a powerful maternal faction. Where did these women come from? Contrary to romanticized Western tales, most were not volunteers, nor were they seduced into palace life. The majority were slaves, captured through wars, purchased in markets, or presented as diplomatic gifts. Many were of European origin, Slavic, Circassian, Greek, or Ukrainian, while others came from the vast territories under Ottoman control. Upon entering the harem, their former identities were erased. They were given new names, often poetic or descriptive, such as Gulbahar, Spring Rose, or Hurrem, the Joyful One. They were taught the Turkish language, educated in Islam, and trained in courtly etiquette, music, dance, and conversation. Only the most talented and captivating rose through the ranks. But the women were not alone in this cloistered world. Alongside them were the men who guarded, served, and sometimes ruled the harem, the eunuchs. These men, castrated to ensure their separation from the women, were divided into two groups: the black eunuchs, often of African origin, and the white eunuchs, largely from the Balkans or Caucasus. Their roles differed, as did the nature of their castration, but together they formed the backbone of harem security and administration. At the top of this hierarchy were two powerful figures: the Kisler Agassi, chief black eunuch, and the Kapi Agassi, chief white eunuch. The chief black eunuch, in particular, wielded extraordinary influence. Not only did he guard the Sultan's family, but he also acted as a political broker, carrying messages between the Valide Sultan, the Grand Vizier, and even foreign ambassadors. On more than one occasion, eunuchs became kingmakers, their whispered advice swaying the fate of the empire. This intricate system of women, slaves, and eunuchs reached its peak during what historians call the Sultanate of Women, Kadinler Sultanati, in the 16th and 17th centuries. It began with the remarkable story of Hurrem Sultan, a slave girl from modern-day Ukraine, who rose to become the legal wife of Suleiman the Magnificent. Hurrem broke every tradition. She bore the Sultan multiple sons, convinced him to marry her, and reshaped the politics of the palace. Her influence extended far beyond the harem. She corresponded with foreign leaders, directed charitable works, and engineered the downfall of Suleiman's eldest son Mustafa in favor of her own children. Hurrem's rise set a precedent. For over a century, women of the harem, Valide Sultans, consorts, and princesses, held unprecedented sway over imperial affairs. Some ruled indirectly through their sons or grandsons, while others clashed with viziers and manipulated court factions. The empire, once driven by conquest, increasingly turned inward, its palace consumed by intrigue. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the influence of the harem waned, but its presence remained central to Ottoman identity until the very end of the empire. Even as the Ottomans lost territory and power, the harem endured as both a symbol of luxury and a shadow of political control. When the empire finally collapsed after World War I, the institution disappeared with it, leaving behind a legacy clouded by myth, yet grounded in undeniable historical importance. Far from being a place of idle pleasure, the Ottoman harem was a crucible of ambition, survival, and power. It was where slaves could become queens, mothers could decide the fate of sons, and whispers could change the course of history. To understand the harem is to understand the empire itself, beautiful, brutal, and endlessly complex. The period known as the Kadinler Sultanati, the Sultanate of Women, marked one of the most extraordinary chapters in Ottoman history. It began in the 16th century with Suleiman the Magnificent and his powerful consort, Hurrem Sultan. Born a slave of Ukrainian origin, Hurrem rose to unprecedented heights, breaking every tradition that had defined the imperial harem. She became the Sultan's legal wife, bore him 4 sons, and turned the secluded world of the harem into a center of political strategy. From behind palace walls, she influenced succession, foreign policy, and the daily decisions of the most powerful man in the empire. Her example transformed the role of women in Ottoman politics. For over a century after her, Valide sultans, consorts, and princesses played decisive roles in imperial affairs, guiding young sultans, shaping alliances, and at times manipulating the empire's direction. Yet this golden age of female influence also coincided with the beginning of the empire's long decline. As the harem became increasingly central to politics, sultans themselves grew more confined, isolated within the palace, and often overshadowed by court intrigues. Expansion slowed, internal corruption deepened, and the once mighty Ottoman state began to lose its territories piece by piece. By the 19th century, the harem's power had weakened, but it remained a symbol of both imperial luxury and political fragility. When the Ottoman Empire collapsed after its defeat in World War I, the Republic of Turkey abolished the institution entirely. Still, the legacy of the harem endures. Far from being a place of idle pleasure, it was a crucible of power, ambition, and survival. It was where enslaved women could rise to unimaginable heights, where mothers could determine the fate of their sons, and where the destiny of an empire was often decided in whispers rather than on the battlefield.